This video covers material that briefly goes over the concept of electrochemistry and electrochemical engineering, specifically the way electrochemical-based sensors work. The material presented was originally developed and narrated by Alan Rodriguez. This video is made possible by the National Science Foundation funded project Boat of Knowledge in the Science Classroom at Ohio University. Now, before we get started, I have some questions for you. Do you know what is electrochemistry? Or do you know what is an electrochemical sensor? Or perhaps going more in depth, do you know what are the benefits of employing electrochemical sensors? If you answer no to any of these questions, or even if you feel you should review these concepts, then I invite you to study and review with me the presentation titled Electrochemical Sensors from Current to a Measurable Signal. Now, before we start, it's important for me to briefly touch on the basic definition of electrochemistry and electrochemical engineering. We will also cover some basic definitions that we'll need in order to better explain how electrochemically based sensors work. Enough with the talking now, let's get started. So, really basic, what is electrochemistry? I will say that the formal definition of the term electrochemistry is the branch of chemistry that studies, deals, and understands the relationship between electrical and chemical phenomena. In other not-so-formal words, this means that electrochemistry aims to understand how electrical processes occur as a function of chemical reactions and/or materials interaction. Makes sense, right? Okay, understanding that, I bet that you have seen this before. Here I show you a basic electrochemical cell which is generating electrical current based on simultaneous oxidation reduction of silver. But this is kinda complicated, isn't it? Don't worry, we'll study and review the formal terminology of electrochemically based conversations and you will understand, I promise. Now, let's see the cool side of electrochemistry, which is what I do. Now, what is electrochemical engineering? Well, my non-formal and simple definition of this field is the branch of engineering that makes use of electrochemistry concepts for modern, top-of-the-line technologies and inventions. Cool, right? So people in chemistry do the science part, which is understanding the reactions and processes, and we engineers do something useful and cool with that knowledge. Don't believe me? Check it out. So filters are one of the most innovative electrical current generation devices. Want to know why? Because with this technology, we can actually do super cool and economic cars, such as this Tesla that, as you know, is taking over the market as of today. Batteries are other of the most promising technologies that we owe to electrochemistry. We can use iPhones and cell phones in general for hours thanks to the innovation and studies made by engineers on electrochemical cells and batteries. Finally, but not last, and the ones we'll be touching base today, are the electrochemical sensors. You have probably seen this glucose sensor at a pharmacy or even at your home. If you have you noticed how easy it is to use and fast on detecting the sugar in your body? If you like this and see its great benefit, then you should thank to those electrochemical engineers that spend maybe years trying to get that easy-to-use device in your home. There are plenty of other technologies derived from electrochemical engineering, such as energy storage devices or capacitors, but we won't touch them for the purpose of this video. Finally, before we start discussing a bit more on electrochemically based sensors, I'll let you review these concepts. Please note that the definitions are not paired with the correct term. It's your job to do that. Please pause the video at this point and try to match the term with the correct meaning. Go ahead. Finished? I hope so, and I hope you got all the answers right. So to check those answers, please match similar colors. You may pause the video as well. If you have any question, please ask your mentor or teacher. If you got all of these answers right, then 2 thumbs up for you. Now, let's get into what really matters, and this is how electrochemical sensors work and what are the most common type of these. Don't worry about that complicated graph. I just wanted to scare you for a minute. we won't be analyzing those, but it is something that we study quite frequently on electrochemical related fields. Now, before we get started, I wanted to do an analogy of current flow, which is the flow of electrons, to water flow. You know 100% guaranteed that if you put your finger in a canal where water is flowing, you will notice that there's a disturbance in the pattern of water flow, right? Just as you see in the image below. Well, you probably know that in science and engineering, we are fans of measuring and detecting changes, like changes in speed, changes in force, changes in matter properties, changes in temperature, etc. So in this case, we will be interested in detecting changes in the flow of water. Imagine a device that can tell you when there's a change in water flow and the magnitude of this change. That would be something, right? So the same concept applies to electrochemical sensors. When designing these sensors, we're interested in measuring and detecting changes in electron or current flow and charges as well. So as opposed to our example where I use water, in this case electrons are flowing. So to recap what we've been discussing, electrochemical sensors detect and measure changes in current, electron, and charges flows. So here are the main type of electrochemical techniques or methods employed to fabricate this sensor. One of the type of sensors uses potentiometry-based approach or technique. Potentiometry is basically a method that detects changes in potential or voltage in between two electrodes. The other type of technique is called electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, and this one basically measures and detects changes in the ability to restrict charge flow across a material. Finally, the other more novel method or technique for fabricating sensors rely on capacitance measurements, which is the type of sensor that basically measures and detects changes in charge storage. This being said and explained, now we'll briefly discuss more in depth what each technique consists on and what is the purpose of each. It is important to mention at this point that two types of sensors rely on electrochemical methods. Regular sensors, mainly used to detect chemicals on soil, water, air, etc., and biosensors, which are used to detect biomolecules on living organisms, serum. Both types of sensors, regular and biosensors, employ the three mentioned techniques for device fabrication. So, potentiometry-based sensors are the simplest ones to explain as they use the same configuration as a regular electrochemical cell as shown in the picture. In this picture shown, we have zinc and copper electrodes connected to one another. If you go to a standard reduction potential table, you'll see that zinc has a more negative potential than copper, which is why electrons flow from the zinc to the copper, or in more technical words, zinc oxidizes and copper reduces. Please, if there are any doubts on this that I just explained, pause the video and have your teacher explain why this process occurs like this more in depth. So, zinc oxidizes and copper reduces. Now, what would you say it happened to the electron flow if I put something on the surface of the zinc electrode? If your answer was that the electron flow will either increase or decrease, you are right. So attaching a material to the surface of that metal electrode will change the electron flow, which will end up in changing the potential or overall voltage over the electrochemical cell. So as you can expect, the higher the amount of materials over the top of the electrode surface, the higher the change in the potential. So based on this, we can make a graph that relates the potential as a function of material over the surface. And based on this curve, you will be able to tell how much material is found over the surface when your potential is X number. And to make the long story short, this is how we make potentiometric-based sensors. The second method is significantly more complex in that there's a lot of complex science and explanation behind it. But I'll keep it simple. Electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, or EIS for short, measures changes in resistance in the resistance of charge to flow. Hopefully you have seen the equation showed below previously. If not, no worries, you'll get there. This equation is known as the Ohm's law, and it basically says that the potential or voltage is directly proportional to the resistance in the system and the current. Meaning that if the resistance changes, the potential will change proportionally. To explain the concept of resistance, imagine a membrane where material X passes through. Now, similarly as when we discussed potentiometry, let's put something in the surface of the membrane. This will perturb the flow of material X throughout the membrane, right? So now, say this material X are positive or negative charges and the membrane is an actual membrane. If we deposit any particular over that surface, the flow of charges throughout the membrane will get affected as well, which will end up in increasing the resistance of those charges to flow throughout the membrane. Get it? So based on this, we generate correlations between the resistance in the system and the concentration of the particulate or that material X to generate curves like this. As you can see, the higher the concentration of material X in the x-axis, the higher the resistance as in the y-axis, and this is how we make these sensors. Finally, dealing with capacitance, the concept is very similar. This time, instead of measuring the amount of charge flow throughout the material, we measure the amount of charge stored in the system. As you can see in the left picture, what we do is that we fill the electrodes, one with positive charges and one with negative charges. Because of this, and as you know from basic physics, opposite charges attract. The charges present in the solution at where the two electrodes are inserted will move to the surface of the electrode according to their charges. This amount of positive charges on one side and negative on the other, or vice versa, generates a measurable variable called charge. So what we do in sensors, as what we do before, is putting materials and desired particles over the surface of those electrodes to see how that affects the overall charge in the system, which is known as the capacitance. Then, after gathering data at multiple points, we can generate graphs that looks like the ones on the right that relates capacitance and material concentration. Well, this is all I have for today. I want to thank you for your attention and encourage you to go green. Help us save the planet. Us electrochemical engineers try to save it by reducing the dependence on fossil fuels by creating ultra-noble batteries that can substitute this on energy generation. You can make a difference today by recycling. Have a great day, and once again, thanks for your attention.